One of the things I really love about the masterful construction of this memoir is also something that could be seen as a drawback, and that is, as Lehman admits, that the most traumatic things that brought this book into the world are not textually in the book. Lehman is here to tell his story and trust us to figure out what he still can't bear to say. He admits that he planned to write a very different, more self-helpy book, and one that was basically a lie. Luckily, as readers, we get the raw and real story. A story of his childhood marked by confusing encounters with sex, with bewildering self-hatred for his body, by the heavy expectations of his elders for his success in life, and very importantly punctuated with beautiful instances of love, support, happiness, and friendship. What Lehman's childhood friend terms black abundance. More memoirs should be as funny, searing, and honest, but then again, there's only one Kiese Lehman. He is one of many lauded and talented Black authors whose stories have faced challenges and threats of removal from libraries, simply for speaking their truth.
One of the most controversial titles of the past several years in the American Library Association's most banned book 2 years running has been Maia Kobabe's powerful graphic memoir, Genderqueer. Kobabe, who uses airs pronouns, takes the reader on a journey through her childhood and adolescence, chronicling the steps he took to actualizing her gender. Everything from first periods to first crushes, burgeoning sexuality and awkward bodies, Kobabe touches on it in this honest depiction of her life. Despite being frequently targeted for being too sexually explicit, the author has stated that Genderqueer was always intended for audiences 16 and up. Genderqueer is a prime example of an impactful, resonant text that is viewed as being for children simply because it's a comic text. Kobabe articulates her story in a way that is enjoyable for newbies and comic veterans alike, one that we can all find bits of ourselves in.
The study of history can apparently be pretty controversial. The story of the United States, along with most of the Western world, has been told by those in power. Thus, the version of history taught in schools and read in books has often been whitewashed, with the role of populations that are not white men being largely ignored or glossed over. Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz attempts to unravel some of the myths surrounding our country's founding in this important book. Dunbar Ortiz charts how the policies surrounding the indigenous peoples that had long been living in these lands led to their widespread displacement and ultimately their genocide. In indigenous peoples' history, the United States has been challenged due to its unsparing portrayal of our history's truths as told through the lens of the oppressed.
Right. Next, I've got Check Please here. Biddy Biddle, Eric, but call him Biddy, has two passions. He likes baking pies, he likes playing hockey, and he is able to do both of those at Samuel University. This webcomic turned graphic novel follows Biddy's first 2 years of college as he moves in and gets to know his college bros and just generally lives life to the fullest. It is definitely a paean to college sports, to the sort of friendships bordering on brotherhood that you really get in a intense place like college, and also a story of overcoming some of his fears. Biddy played in a league that had no checking, and now he isn't. So he's having to deal with his fear of being checked on the ice, and also maybe his fear of what he might be feeling for his teammate Jack right here. So if you're looking for a heartwarming story about adolescents becoming grown-ups, Check Please is a great one.
I'm looking for Alaska by John Green. Miles is ready to leave childhood mishaps and loneliness behind. It's junior year of high school, and he's off to Culver Creek Prep, a boarding school far from home. Miles is taken under the wing of his new roommate, Chip, and quickly forms meaningful bonds with Chip's circle of veteran boarders, including the smart and sexy Alaska. But friends' lives are complicated, and no matter how close you get to a person, there are always things that you won't know or understand. Green said of his book, when you're a teenager, you're doing all kinds of important things for the first time, and in writing Alaska, I wanted to de-romanticize some of those firsts. Some of those firsts have led Looking for Alaska to be one of the most challenged books in 2022 due to its sexual content. You'll cringe, you'll laugh, you'll cry.
We're all familiar with Eric Carle's more popular picture books, from The Very Hungry Caterpillar to Brown Bear, What Do You See? And most people can recognize his unique art style almost immediately. One of my favorites of Carle's is Draw Me a Star, which is the story of an artist. Simple as that. The artist, from his earliest days, wants to draw. First, he draws a star, then he continues to draw a sun, a tree, a woman and a man, a house, a dog, flowers, clouds, and a rainbow. Each time he draws, he is encouraged to draw more. In his warm, inviting, collaging art style, Eric Carle guides readers through this artist's life, one that shows growth, creativity, and celebrates the artist in everyone. This book is a reminder that art is everywhere, and everyone at any stage of life is capable of creating something beautiful.
I'm a huge advocate for the anthology format. What a great way to find new authors to read or to explore the varied approaches to a genre to see what sparks your interest. A great comics anthology is a survey of the magical combination of art and writing, whether made by a team or by one person. Be Gay Do Comics fulfills all of these appeal factors and more. All of these comics were originally published online through The Nib, a sadly now defunct comics magazine. The book showcases a wonderful variety of queer voices. You will find memoir, humor, fiction, history, and reportage in here. Stories that run the gamut of brave and vulnerable, reverent, sarcastic, eye-opening, and joyous. I think perhaps it is this beautiful openness of experience that makes people want to ban it from the shelves, lest other readers resonate with its gayness. I exhort you to be Gay Do Comics, and find your favorite new comics artist now.
Cousin duo Mariko Tamaki and Jillian Tamaki bring the woes of girlhood to life in This One Summer, a poignant YA graphic novel chronicling an eventful summer between friends Rose and Wendy as they spend their vacation in the beach town of Oahu. Full of lush landscapes, authentic depictions of family dynamics, and existential approaches to adolescence, both author and illustrator effectively create a backdrop for this coming-of-age tale. The two girls in their encroaching teendom start to think about what being a teenager looks like, as the older teens around them experiment with alcohol, drugs, and sex. This One Summer touches on mature themes like infertility, miscarriage, and alcoholism, but never glosses over the importance of these issues to the narrative. Challenged often for being sexually explicit and profane, this graphic novel holds back no punches when showing the aftermath of what happens when young people are forced to deal with very adult things.
There's a non-zero chance the answer to a question like, "So you want to talk about race?" is actually no. Two people can start a conversation feeling they are on the same page, only to finish it on opposite ends with both parties feeling that they weren't heard or understood. Ijeoma Oluo has written a book that acts as a sociological study of our current moment and a self-improvement manual, all leading to a clarion call toward more fruitful and honest conversations. With challenging a book like So You Want to Talk About Race, a statement is made that indeed we don't want to have these conversations at all. Oluo touches on many keystone subjects, including police brutality and the insidious myth of the model minority, showing readers of all backgrounds how to navigate from having what may seem like a difficult dialogue to having a fruitful and positive.
Check Please from earlier was a very happy graphic novel. This one, not so much. Flamer is the story of Aiden Navarro. He is a 14-year-old Filipino-American Catholic Boy Scout who is enjoying his last week of summer camp. This is normally his favorite part of summer, but becoming a teenager also means that he's become extremely sensitive to what other people think of him, how they perceive him, and especially what he thinks that they are thinking. So as his week at camp begins to spiral out of control, and as his thoughts begin to spiral out of control, Aiden finds himself increasingly desperate and wondering what he can do to make all of this pain and anguish of being a teenager who feels like they don't fit go away. This is a very heavy read. It deals with themes like body image issues, homophobia, racism, school bullying, domestic violence, and even suicidal thoughts. But just like Aiden sees the light at the end of the tunnel at the end of the book, it's hoped that the teens reading this will also see it does get better. Your brain's just not your friend right now.
Parachutes by Kelly Yang. Claire Wong is a parachute, a wealthy Chinese teenager sent to the U.S. to live in a private home and attend an American high school. Claire isn't happy about the arrangement, and neither is her host sister, Danny De La Cruz, a Filipino-American scholarship student whose single mom has opened her home to Claire as a source of income. This might look like a YA rom-com at first glance, but there's nothing light and breezy about this novel. Parachutes is about sex, racism, and privilege. It's a smart story about being female in a culture where young women are superficially empowered to be sexy or have sex, but in reality frequently find themselves powerless and objectified. Parachutes was banned from some school libraries because of its sexual content, including rape, sexual harassment, and pedophilia.
Aliyah Muhammad Baker is the librarian of Basra, Iraq. She is used to her library being a community center where people can talk and read and learn about all sorts of topics, but with war on the horizon, Aliyah is worried her library will be destroyed. She believes the 30,000 books in her library are priceless. There's even a biography of Muhammad that is over 700 years old. She asks the governor for permission to move the books to a safe location, but is refused. Aliyah decides that the books are too valuable and secretly begins to move the books to her home. War reaches Basra. Soldiers and government workers abandon the library, and Aliyah pleads to her friend Anas for help. Together, with other neighbors and friends, they move the books to a safe place. A fire burns down the library, and Aliyah is heartbroken, wishing and waiting for the war to be over, but knows that at least the books are safe with her, the librarian of Basra.
Last Night at the Telegraph Club is my favorite kind of historical novel. It's not self-consciously historical, with characters conveniently meeting the movers and shakers of their time, participating on the periphery of world-changing events. This is life, but in history, and Lily Hu's problems are issues of her time, in this engrossing coming-of-age and coming-out-to-self story set in 1954 San Francisco. It doesn't shy away from the real dangers of being gay in the 50s or the tension of being Chinese-American during peak Red Scare paranoia. It also deliberately avoids the tragic gay ending required of the pulp novels that Lily herself discovers in her local general store. Lowe paints a vivid and emotionally wrenching portrait of a young woman who can't help but dream a different world for herself. Dream that she can fall in love and be safe in that love. A winner of the National Book Award among many other honors, it is unfortunate that such a story has been targeted as somehow dangerous by book banners.
One of my all-time favorite young adult novels, Stephen Chbosky's The Perks of Being a Wallflower, is a quintessentially Pittsburgh book, with nods to Shenley Park and local colleges, but at the end of the day, it's a universally heart-wrenching coming-of-age tale. The novel is written in epistolary style, with the main character Charlie addressing each section with "Dear Friend." And we watch his first year of high school unravel with each passing letter. When he befriends step-siblings Sam and Patrick, Charlie finds himself spiraling into a life he could have never expected, unearthing his own trauma in the process. Usually banned for being sexually explicit, Perks confronts the complexities of adolescence and the desire we all have to be accepted and to be loved. Plus, there's nothing more iconic than the tunnel scene in the film adaptation. If you know, you know.
The science behind blind spot, hidden biases of good people, is the implicit association test. This test was developed to quantify where bias unknowingly operates within an individual. It does not test for good intentions or well-meaning attitudes. Thus, it can present outcomes that may actually alarm the test taker. Two of the psychologists that developed the implicit association test, Marazan Arbanagi and Anthony G. Greenwald, wrote Blind Spot to further the conversations around bias and how it can operate in both everyday interactions and in the larger cultural environment. As the book shows, in attempting to confront our blind spots, we can then better align our intentions with our actions. A book like Blind Spot comes under scrutiny as it makes plain that implicit bias is insidious and systemic, an assertion that no doubt makes some people wholly uncomfortable. In the end, challenging Blind Spot just further solidifies the thesis behind both the book and the implicit association test at its center.
Anybody who missed it when the author visited Pittsburgh, I encourage you to pick up How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. This is one of the books that really put the term anti-racist on the map and started shaping the current national discussion about systemic racism and basically just the way that all of our societies, all of our systems are set up with only one kind of person in mind, and what that means both physically, where it's easier to do things, and emotionally, how you feel about yourself. So in each chapter of this book, Kendi goes through and he not only talks about, here's another aspect of how systemic racism affects society, he shares some really raw personal stories about how it's affected him personally, both in terms of the opportunities he was afforded and catching himself in thinking that really didn't like himself very much. So this is a book that I would encourage you to go through slowly, but it is worth it because you will be thinking.
Another Pittsburgh author, Me and Earl and the Dying Girl by Jesse Andrews. When Rachel is diagnosed with cancer, Greg's mom encourages him to be a supportive friend. Not actually knowing Rachel all that well, Greg and his friend Earl turn to one thing they do know, making a movie. Me and Earl and the Dying Girl is a quirky examination of life as a teen boy trying to fly under the radar at a big urban high school. Nod to Pittsburgh Public's Alderdice High. Published in 2012, it's currently one of the top 10 most challenged books on ALA's list, which is ironic considering how mild the sexual content of this YA novel is comparatively. Regarding the upswing and challenges against his book and so many others, Jesse shared this hopeful opinion in July 2023. Young people are smart and they're voracious, and I think they're about to bring our national literacy and national quality of conversation and thought to a much higher place. And if you worry that book bans might slow them down, don't. Parents should know this already. There is no force on earth greater than a teenager's will to do something you've told them not to.
19 minutes. That's how long Peter Houghton's rampage lasts. In that time, he murders 10 people and wounds 19 others. But 19 minutes isn't just about what happens after the school shooting. It's also about everything that led to the horrifying violence that changes the town of Sterling forever. Picoult takes us through the years leading up to the shooting, 17 years before, 10 years before, 5 years before, and the morning of. In a small town, everyone knows everyone, and even those not at the school are affected by the tragedy. Judge Alex Cormier must decide if presiding over this case is worth losing the relationship she has with her daughter, Josie, who was amid the violence and present while her boyfriend was killed. But Josie can't remember the tragedy. Or can she? How could Lacey and Lewis Houghton, Peter's parents, not see the warning signs of their troubled son? Though published in 2007, this gripping and harrowing novel is still applicable in today's society.
While this selection, as far as I know, is not on any of the lists of books that organizations want to remove from libraries, it is a story of a society where the banning of books is normal and about what it takes to fight for a freer world. In the South Korea of 1983, Hyun-suk is going off to college. Going from sheltered family life to a university with daily political protests is a shock, and she tries to stay out of any political discussions, not wanting to be accused of being a communist and thereby risk arrest and torture. Politics are inescapable, though. Every club she joins turns out to be a conduit to secret dissent. Before long, Hyun-suk sees the importance of understanding what her government is trying to hide and risks a lot to pursue this knowledge and protect herself and her friends. Humor, suspense, hope, and camaraderie mingle in Hyun-suk Kim's memoir, which is slightly fictionalized to protect the identity of the author's friends.
Author David Levitin is no stranger to getting his books banned, but his lesser-known title, Two Boys Kissing, has been the most challenged in recent years, primarily for its cover featuring, two boys kissing on it. The novel follows a variety of gay men and boys, but most notably highlights an arc based on a true story of two 17-year-old boys trying to set the Guinness World Record for the longest kiss, 32 hours of non-stop smooching. There are a few other tales of burgeoning sexuality, relationship woes, and first love, but most enticing are the words of men lost to the AIDS crisis that function as a Greek chorus of sorts in the text. Levitin creates a heartwarming queer narrative that also confronts the uglier side of living as a gay man or boy in the US, with distinct voices throughout that remind us that everyone deserves a chance at love.
Catherine Adele West's debut novel, Saving Ruby King, is the story of a murder of two families that are intertwined in decades-long secrets and cover-ups, and two young women who are caught in the middle of it all. When Ruby's mother's body is found in their largely Black neighborhood on Chicago's South Side, the police don't find it all that worthy of deep investigation. For Ruby, she can't help but suspect her father, always prone to violence, is responsible. Ruby's bond with her best friend Layla is also deeply tested, as Layla's pastor father instructs his daughter to stay away from Ruby, or is he just trying to distance himself from Ruby's father too? Told from each of the main characters' perspectives, along with the all-knowing voice of the Hope Church that sits at the center of all of their lives, Saving Ruby King is a novel you won't soon forget.
Next up, I've got This Book is Gay by Juno Dawson, and it does what it says on the tin. This is a book originally published in 2014 with several subsequent editions because a lot has changed since 2014 in the national, international landscape for queer rights, including the author's name. This book was originally written because the author felt like they heard this joke a lot. Gee, when you come out, there should be an instruction manual for that. Well, they said, no, this is it. This is the instruction manual, either for whether you have realized something about yourself or you're starting to question. This is a book that teens can go to start and try and figure out, okay, so I don't fit in the box I was handed. Where is my box? Do I even have a box? Do I not want a box at all? I said the author's name had changed, and that's because this book does open minds to new perspectives. The author had originally thought they were a gay man, but as they spoke in conversation with plenty of the other folks that they interviewed for the book, they realized that all of the experiences that the trans women were saying really resonated with them. They were saying, that's me, that's my story, that's how I've always felt. And so now, originally, the author is now Juno Dawson, and she is proud to present the latest edition of This Book is Gay.
The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sharmin Alexie, a complicated YA novel by an author with a complicated reputation. Absolutely True Diary was the most challenged book in the US from 2010 to 2019. This book was banned and challenged for profanity, racist jargon, and sexual references, and more recently, allegations of sexual misconduct by the author. The novel features a teenager born with disabilities who's grown up on a reservation in Spokane, Washington. 14-year-old Junior is an avid reader and artist with a protective best friend, Rowdy. Soon after they start freshman year, Junior transfers from a school on the res to one in a small, predominantly white town. Although his parents support his decision, everyone else sees him as a traitor, and Junior struggles with questions about community and identity. Cartoons and dark humor are a powerful juxtaposition to violence, bullying, poverty, and prejudice, resulting in a truly memorable coming-of-age novel.
Alison Bechdel's graphic novel memoir is complicated, raw, and filled with grief. It centers on two things: her relationship with her late father, Bruce, and sexuality, both hers and her father's. Immediately, the reader understands her family is different. The family business is running a funeral home, called the Fun Home. The Bechtels are living in an old Victorian house, and there's even a comparison to the Addams family. Each chapter delves deeper into the father-daughter relationship, and the more that is uncovered, the more complicated their relationship becomes. The two are constantly trying to understand each other, as they share a common yet unspoken bond. When Allison comes out to her parents in a letter, "I am a lesbian," her mother reveals that her father had been having affairs with men. Shortly after, Bruce is killed by a truck. Allison questions whether this was a suicide and feels slighted, as she wishes she could have talked to him about his own sexuality. And while her entire life Allison had been surrounded by death, it is only in her father's passing that she is engulfed by grief for the relationship and honesty she could have had with her father.
Trung Le Nguyen employs a sweetly romantic drawing style in his graphic novel that reminds me of children's anime of the 80s or illustrators of the late 70s. It hits a nostalgic and yearning undertone that is perfect for the story of Tien, a 12-year-old who lives in America with his mother, a refugee from Vietnam. Together they read Vietnamese fairy tales that are variants on classic stories: Cinderella, The Little Mermaid, and of course The Magic Fish. The stories bring Tien and his mother closer, insulate them from the stressful experiences in their lives, and for Tien allow him to use the freedom of fantasy to explore how to be true to himself and tell his mother that he is gay. The rich layers of interpretation in this book emerge in multiple readings and suit it for a wide range of audiences. While it can be read as a straightforward story of a mother and a son and the experience of growing up, it also is about cultural communication, the meaning of home, the importance of story, and the pain of loss. I honestly don't know why it is on banned book lists, apart from the inclusion of a gay character who is not punished for coming out. So don't miss out on The Magic Fish.
The only middle grade addition to my list, Raina Telgemeier's drama, is a wholesome ode to friendship, finding yourself, and of course, musical theater. Protagonist Callie is a middle school stage crew whiz with a solid group of friends and a big crush on fellow theater nerd and new friend Jessie. Drama has a diverse cast of characters, highlighting queer identities across the board, but never spectacularizing them. This book is a love letter to our childhood selves, to the way that so many of us geeked out over our favorite hobbies in our youth. As a middle grade text, Drama is often met with retaliation for not being age appropriate because its target audience leans slightly younger than the other titles on the list, with LGBTQIA+ themes being deemed sexually explicit by challengers. Full of whimsical illustrations and a colorful cast of tween characters, Drama is guaranteed to leave you with a smile on your face and a newfound appreciation for all the dorky things that you did in middle school yourself.
Mike Munoz's life is really about to begin. He's all done with high school and working as a landscaper, and even if he hates his boss, he's undeniably good at it. But after he loses his job, his plans for a well-known future seem to be completely stalling out. As Mike attempts to find his way in a world that seems intent on putting him back in his place, he begins to finally open himself up to the positive possibilities the world has to offer. Author Jonathan Evison has created a first-person account of a young man finding his voice, his purpose, and yes, even his sexuality. Mike Munoz is often silenced or discounted throughout Longwood, which adds to the tragic irony that this coming-of-age novel is one of the most challenged titles of the past few years.
All right, I have All Boys Aren't Blue by George Matthew Johnson, who sometimes went by George, sometimes went by Matthew, and now goes by both. It is the story of him growing up as a queer black boy and feeling like he never quite fit in anywhere because he went to a predominantly white school and he felt like he couldn't be his full authentic black self there. And when he was surrounded by his black community, he wasn't sure how he would be treated if he was honest about his sexuality, about his feelings towards men, and even a little bit towards his gender, his questioning of his gender. And he had a good but rough childhood because of these internal feelings. And so he wanted to be sure that other young gay black men like him knew that they weren't going through it alone, that someone else had been there, and that it's important to try and make things better, not just when you're an adult, but that adults are working to make things better for teens now, which is why he calls this book a memoir manifesto, because he's advocating for these teens, he's advocating for these youth, but he's also telling the story of his family. Don't miss the chapters about his grandmother, because his love for her pours off of every page.
And Crank by Ellen Hopkins. Loosely based on her daughter's 6-year struggle with drug addiction, writing the Crank trilogy helped Hopkins process how her quote-unquote perfect A-plus kid became addicted to meth and the long years of helping her daughter fight that addiction. Told in free verse, Hopkins chose poetry to better capture how people think and stream of consciousness, repetition, and bursts of emotion. Personally, I found myself missing some of the detail and more elaborate context that standard narration and prose can provide. The book has been challenged many times and was the 4th most challenged title in 2010 due to drugs, sexual content, and language. At least one reviewer has described Ellen Hopkins' Crank as a crime against humanity, not because of its sexual content, drugs, or language, but rather based on her opinion about the quality of the writing. Even subpar poetry and cliche are no excuse for censorship, however. If you do enjoy the book, you can follow the main character's ongoing struggle with drugs and motherhood in the novels Glass and Fallout.
Amir is living with his father, Baba, and their 2 servants, Ali and his son Hassan, in Kabul, Afghanistan. Amir and Hassan are best friends and are intent on winning the kite flying tournament that year. But when Afghanistan's king is overthrown, their lives start to change. Amir watches Hassan get assaulted, and instead of helping his friend, he betrays him. To escape the violence, Baba and Amir leave for Pakistan and then America, where life plunders on. Amir graduates college, marries, and Baba passes from lung cancer. Eventually, Amir hears from an old friend back in Pakistan who reveals the devastating news that the Taliban has killed Hassan and his wife and sent their son to an orphanage. Haunted by his decisions from his childhood, Amir finds the boy and takes him to America. With powerful yet clear language, Hosseini writes about friendship, betrayal, and the search for redemption.